Hello, this is Keanu Crouch, course instructor at Western Governors University with the Cyber Defense and Countermeasures course here for the October 5th cohort. And for this cohort, we'll be teaching lesson one of the CompTIA CertMaster Learn for CISA Plus, and this will be for the CS0-003 iteration of the exam. The material that you will see presented will not be an in-depth analysis of the material. I'm not going to sit here and just read through every single line of the material. This is kind of more of a skim, just in case you had any issues with this specific lesson in CertMaster, and to kind of give some real world analogies and analysis or synopsis based off of kind of how you view the word, of kind of some of the concepts that you have experienced as you've been going through the course. So this is the CertMaster dashboard that you receive. Is if you just started the course, this is the first lesson. This is how you begin the course, and this is the first thing that you're presented with after going into CertMaster, clicking lessons, clicking on lesson one. This is the first page you're presented with. This is the beginning of the course. I appreciate you all for attending this course. I appreciate you all for pursuing further education in the field of cybersecurity analysis and being a part of the defensive cybersecurity operations world. And I hope to work with you all in the future. What you will learn is the field of SMEs in this industry is not as big as one would believe it to be. There is a very high chance that in the performance of our duties that we will cross paths one day. And my goal in life, as I've pursued this field for many years, is to ensure that everyone, future coworkers, future partners, future professionals, have the knowledge that they need in order to be successful. And if you have any questions for me, I can always be reached through email. You can always reach out to me by phone through my WGU email. I am also on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to me there, and I can give you any knowledge that I've gained over the past, or any advice for what you may be pursuing in your future. So, without further ado, I will get into lesson one of Cyber Security Analysis Plus. For background knowledge, this is the intermediate level of the CompTIA pathway for cybersecurity analysts. The first portion will be Security Plus, which all of you have gained at this point. And then now it's the CISA Plus, and then you can move on into the CAS Plus, which is a graduate level program. For anyone that is in this portion now learning CISA Plus, congratulations, you have made it to a portion in your academic career that has caused you to be at the intermediate level, and this is actually a cert that is given to individuals that have showed a kind of higher level of expertise and understanding of cybersecurity. So essentially, this is just kind of gives you the understanding of the overarching course of CISA Plus, and as far as what the C0-003 exam will be teaching you, and some of the objectives that you'll be able to understand after completion of the exam. So I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna read these to you verbatim. You all have access to this. This is just something that can kind of give you an understanding of what you'll begin to learn. One thing I always tell students is when you're taking your certifications, when you're applying for jobs, when you're updating your resume, these specific objective areas that are highlighted on your certification tracks, these are the kind of keywords that you're going to look for when you're applying for your jobs, because you are learning these specific concepts in these objective areas. So when you're applying for a job, let's say you apply for a job and you want to work for a cert team, you can use these as keywords for when you're trying to find the job that you want to apply for. So after learning these skill sets, you know how to do incident response activities. You know what tools are used when it comes to SOCs. You know process improvements that will enable you to better secure your environments that you'll be working for. You understand the importance of system and network architecture concepts. So you could use these specific things as keywords to help build your resumes and also help look for specific jobs and roles that you want to work in if this is something that you want to get into moving forward in the future. Um, this can kind of be a initial guideline to move forward and based off of the things that you learned in this course. When you're asked questions in interviews, these concepts are the answers to those specific questions. And the reason for certain things in these courses, the reason why you learn certain things, some of them might seem very elementary, but understanding the fundamentals will help you actually apply these concepts in your fields and in your work centers, in your enterprises, and also help you answer give the correct answer during your interview process. So I'll proceed. This is just an understanding of how to use CertMaster Learn. Many of you have already kind of approached this, but just as a quick um, practical teach on the best way that I would say as your instructor to approach CertMaster Learn, what I would say do is when you log in, you're presented a page, straight to your lessons, click on lesson one. That's the best way to get into it. After you're done with your lesson, shoot straight to your practice test. So I do not recommend to go from lesson one to lesson two to lesson three. I recommend lesson one practice test. That way you can gauge how well you understood lesson one. As far as rate your confidence, this over here, I want you all to actually use that when you are going through these objective areas in these lessons. Because if you read through some of this information, if you don't understand it, mark it. That helps me as your instructor to understand what information you may not understand best or what proficiency areas you might need more help with. And then it'll also help you as a student to know where you have to go back to. And this applies to all of CompTIA CertMaster pathways. CertMaster is the same across the board for the multiple certifications they offer. Use this to your advantage. If you read through something and it's confusing, and you read through it again and it's still confusing, mark it low, mark it medium. Don't just mark it high to get through. I'm not going to look at your confidence level and say, okay, he knows all these things because of his confidence level. That's a tool to use for you to understand what you've actually grasped, what you've learned, and it helps me understand what you need assistance with that we can actually talk about on our one-on-one conferences. So with that, we're going to get into lesson one. Within this lesson, we're going to learn about understanding vulnerability response, handling, and management. So as a cybersecurity analyst, vulnerability response, handling, and management, this is something that is present within every organization. Um, Within this, there are several different roles that you can do that kind of pertain to vulnerability response, handling, and management. One of the most prevalent roles with this is your guys that ensure compliance and your kind of like your patch managers, SCCM, things of that nature. These are the guys that are going to conduct your scans to see what systems are not in compliance with whatever your policies are within your organization. These are your guys that are going to respond to incidents. So if there's a suspected incident, such as help desk tickets submitted, someone says this information is weird, or I see something weird on my computer, may not always go to you. It may go to the help desk person. The help desk looks into it and says, okay, this is weird. This may be something that would be elevated. This kind of gives you a basic understanding of how to respond to incidents, how to identify vulnerabilities in an organization, and how to manage those incidents as a cybersecurity analyst. So this is the intro. What these intro videos give you is kind of an understanding of your brevity and your impact on the organization from what you'll learn in these in the lesson. I tend to tell students to watch this, especially if they're new to the field, because this allows you to get information that you may not know and how and where your specific position is within the organization and how that impacts the overall organizational structure. I'm not going to play this video for you. You all have access to this, and you all want to kind of get to the meat of the things. So, governance. I'm not going to sit here and read this. What I want you to know about governance is the overarching way that your organization responds to security incidents, applies its policies, and secures the overall enterprise. That's basically how it works. So if you see this specific acronym here, GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. Governance, when you look at basically how y'all are doing things, the policies that y'all are putting in place, because in order for you to be a secure organization, you have to govern the organization from a perspective of you have to implement rules, you have to implement policies to ensure that your employees, your analysts, your managers, everybody's following a common set of rules and guidelines that ensure security across the organization. As a new cybersecurity analyst, you're not going to be the one creating this stuff. You're going to be the one implementing these things. You're going to be the enforcers of these things. And you want your security tools and your security systems to align to whatever the policies and the governance are, the governances within the organization. Risk, risk is generally handled by higher level leadership. These individuals are the ones that determine what they want to do with the risk. But the job of a cybersecurity analyst, what you're charged with is you have to give your leaders the facts they need in order to determine how they will respond or approach the risk, whether they want to mitigate it, avoid it, transfer it. And we'll get to that later in this lesson. But a lot of times students look at risk as like, okay, that's CISP level, CASP level. That's higher than what I'm doing. I'm more technical, I'm hands-on keyboard. Hands-on keyboard guys need to, or gals need to understand how to convey the risk to the leader to ensure that the leader makes the appropriate decision given all of the relevant facts. Risk is very important to your job. If you think something is a high risk at your level, you need to convey that to your leader. Your leader, your leadership may not understand exactly the nuances of what a specific CVE, what risk that poses to the organization, given the business controls and the operational level. You have to understand how to take that technical level understanding, put in a report, put it in a briefing, put it in a conversation to the higher level headquarters at staff meetings and things of that nature, so they understand the best way to approach the risk to ensure their bottom line, whether that's a financial gain, whether that's um, a sovereign nation gain. Like, so if you work for government, it's not a financial gain, but it's to protecting the sovereignty of the United States of America. It could also be a nonprofit. You want to protect people's information. You want to protect what you're trying to do. So you, as middle manager, intermediate level, you have to understand business processes, what's important, what are your jewels to your organization. We call them jewels. It's like, what are the crown jewels? What does your organization care about? And you also know the other side of how is that protected? You know, the technical side. Then compliance. Compliance comes into place when we talk about what type of industry that you're in, what you're doing. Um, Banks, you have PCI DSS. Not just banks, you also have commerce environments. Anytime you're using financial information, you're probably going to to use the guidelines set forth in PCI DSS to ensure that you are handling financial data properly, that you are securing this properly, that you are ensuring that bank account information, uh, credit card information, transaction information, all this information is protected in accordance with the compliance ramifications set out by your governing organization that you abide by in your industry. For hospitals, you got HIPAA. For financial institutions that are at the banking and trading level, the higher level, you got Wall Street, you have SOX compliance. You have to make sure that you are not doing something that is risking the customer's money in a way that is unsafe based off of you not providing information that you should be providing, and that allows other people to ensure your compliance with the guidelines. Compliance is PCI DSS, GLBA, SOX compliant. Risk is acceptance, avoidance, but at your level, it's making sure that you evaluate the specific information given to you and you give it to your leadership so they can make the proper decisions based off what risk is present to them. And then you have governance, Are your policies in place? Are your policies abiding by risk? Well, not risk so much, but compliance. Are your policies in place protecting your organization? So given that on your free time, you can read these. These are kind of the details that go along with that. But I just wanted to give you an understanding of the things that these play into. GRC, when it comes to the overarching policy and governance, GRC is your best friend. GRC is something you're going to hear for the full tenure of your career within this industry. There are roles that have like GRC manager within organizations. That's essentially what it is. A lot of people think it's boring, but it's honestly, in my opinion, one of the most important roles. Now we get into risk management principles. So for instance, this is the thing that when we talked about risk, this is what the decision makers, the leadership is. These are the decisions they're going to make based off the information that you're going to give them from your technical expertise within the field, within the enterprise, your everyday task. Your technical expertise will feed. I have a question. Right, I saw a hand just now. An accident? Okay, so if you could, I don't see a question. If you could just throw it in the chat and we can respond to that toward the end of the cohort. Just moving forward, when we talk about the different risk responses that your leadership will take based off of the information given to them, risk avoidance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step through these and I'm just going to give you the point blank. This is what they're talking about. Risk avoidance means stop doing it. If you have a server that is non-compliant, you have a process that is unsafe, you have an employee in a way that is doing things that can bring risk to your organization, to avoid the risk, the best way to look at it is to get rid of it. So if you have a piece of software they haven't created an update to a 0 day that's been put out into the community, say switch organization, switch software, delete it, just let's stop using this. You have a process, how can we abandon that process, do it a different way? You have a server, turn that server off. Just avoid the risk altogether. We're not actually looking at ways to fix it. Let's just decommission this and find another way of doing this. Risk acceptance. If I have a server that is non-compliant with a lot of the guidelines that as the industry that I'm in, if I have a server that's not compliant with this industry and it takes a lot of work to get this server in compliance, but I need this to do my job, I would have my analyst give me information. It's like, okay, give me all the facts about this because I may not be able to afford to just remove this, put in a risk avoidance measure. I may not be able to afford to put all the measures in that would specifically enable me to protect me from other things, or I may not be able to um, get an analyst in time within the time I need my uptime, like within the time I need my server to be back up to fix all these risks. What I'm going to do, I'm going to accept that risk. I'm going to say, okay, just continue going, but I need all the facts before I can just continue going. I want to mitigate that risk. What can I do to stop the risk? If someone says, hey, we haven't done this patch, and this patch is causing us to be open to a specific threat. To mitigate the risk, like, okay, have we implemented that patch yet? Or what do we need to do to mitigate that risk? Implement the patch. Tell me the details I want to know about how to actually fix the problem. Transferring the risk. Best way to look at transferring the risk, kind of just quick way to just get over that concept, transfer it. Insurance. Insurance is risk transference. When you're talking about moving a risk to a third party, as everyday consumers, risk transfer is when we buy our home insurance, our renter's insurance, our travel insurance, and our property insurance, car insurance, all that stuff. That is risk transference. We don't put the protocols in place to ensure that this risk, we're not mitigating the risk, we're accepting the risk, we're not avoiding the risk. To avoid the risk, we still drive our car, we still live in our house. We're not accepting the risk. To accept the risk would just be not getting anything to protect us. Mitigating the risk, I cannot prevent against hurricanes. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call USA and I'm going to get an insurance policy and I'm transferring that risk of my home being damaged by a hurricane to USA and I'm giving them a financial gain for that. Those are kind of the main ways to look at the different ways, the different approaches to how a leader takes risk. Threat modeling. So when we look at threat modeling, we're looking at how a leader is able to see what the threat to his organization is. So in order to best tell a leader how his risk is, what how something is a threat to his organization, you have to model it. If you just tell someone, "Hey, um, the server has a bad patch," and or the server is not patched, and your organization can go down. If you tell that to someone, let's say you work in the automobile industry, and you're telling this to someone that's not an IT focused individual, he's gonna basically say like, "What are you talking about?" So the way you have to do is you have to model the threat. So first you model the threat to the CISO or the CIO, which he understands how to actually explain this threat to his boss, which is the CEO, which may not be an IT minded individual, but is basically a graphical understanding of, hey, this is the problem we have, and this is a graphical representation of how, if you are not IT minded, how you can be harmed by this issue. That's essentially what it is. So there are different threat models, there are different ways to approach it, but the basis of what this is essentially explaining the threat to a non IT minded individual to their organization. How can their organization be hurt by an IT threat to a non-IT minded individual? You learn about the different ways that threats can be modeled. Some of them are more robust and more technical than others. I personally recommend you in the field to understand your audience when you're using threat modeling structures. When you work somewhere, you know what your boss knows and you know how their mind thinks, and you identify the best threat modeling structure to ensure that you convey the proper information to him so he can make the best decisions. You understand what they think about, what they care about, and you understand the business. So you identify a threat modeling structure or threat modeling platform that best conveys this information. So now we're going to get into different control types and methods to combat those controls, well, and how they're actually used in the field in terms of how we are actually putting in controls to respond to risk or respond to vulnerabilities to threats. So your three main control types are your technical, operational, and managerial. Best way to look at these things, your technical is hands-on keyboard. Scripts, these are your threats are IT related things. Your technical threats are IT related things. So we're talking about actually hands-on keyboard on the systems, your sysadmins, your network admins, your cyber security professionals, they are responding to your technical threats. Operational threats are kind of more of your middle managers, and these are more of your policies in place to prevent technical threats from occurring. These are your policies that you have in place to ensure that your password policies are preventing people from just doing a waterfall password and getting your systems. Your operational threats are ensuring that your business processes are not making your organization vulnerable to attack. Your managerial threats are your bigwigs, your leadership, your managerial controls are in place to ensure that from a high level, I can control my organization, prevent my organization from being attacked from a non-technical, non-specifically business-minded threat, more of a strategic level. How can I move my organization in a direction that will provide the most secure platform moving forward from I don't want to know about scripts. I don't know about systems, software. I want to know about acquisitions. I want to know about partnerships. I want to know about high level, C-level executives' decisions in order to put those managerial controls in. So those controls are put into different functional types. So in order to get a best understanding of how these functional types are applied, um, just a quick rundown, we have our preventative controls. These are your system hardening controls. How do you prevent something from happening? These are your firewall rules. These are your patches. These are your password policies, your user account reviews. These are ensuring that your system is as controlled and hardened as it can be to prevent a threat because you will never be able to stop the adversary from getting into your network. All you can do is secure yourself in the best manner possible to ensure that the adversary's got to work hard to do it. 0 days will always be present. As long as computers connect to the internet, no one is ever perfect, and for your system to run, someone has created something in order for your system to do the things that it does. No one is perfect. A human was behind something at a certain point and mistakes happen. All you can do is reduce your attack surface, put in preventative controls to ensure that the adversary, they're not just going to pop in. They got to work hard to get into my network. Detective controls are your SIEMs, your security information event management systems. This is your job as a cybersecurity analyst. You are sitting there looking at logs every day. Your job is to ensure that you can, if something does happen, you can see it and you can respond to it. You are looking at logs, you're looking at net flows, you're looking at unusual traffic, unusual user activity. This is how you detect the presence of an attack. Corrective is happened already, and you're trying to reduce the impact. Corrective is after the fact. Preventative is before. Corrective and responsible, which we'll get into in just a moment, are after. Detective can happen during. Detective is continuous monitoring. Compensating is we get into more of a risk management perspective when we talk about compensating security control functional types. So we try to figure out the best way to balance our preventative and our responsive or our corrective actions with the compensating. So essentially, what we're doing is we're putting in a control that it's like, okay, it may happen, it can happen. What are we going to do when it does happen? What types of controls are we going to put in? Do we have hot sites, cold sites, warm sites? What are we going to do to compensate for the fact that we are prone to an attack? We have to keep business going. So responsive, it's in the word, your incident response techniques. This has been confirmed as an attack. What are you immediately going to go into as a cybersecurity analyst when you identify all the standby people have been called, you're sitting on night shift and you see that alert come through, you have investigated and it is happening right there. You're on the ops floor. That is when you get into your responsive control types. So preventative, we're trying to reduce our attack surface. Detective, we're looking at logs, we're watching the scene. Corrective, it's happened. How are we going to come back from this? Business continuity plans. What are we going to do to come back to it? Compensating, balancing everything I just talked about with preventative, detective, and corrective and responsive. The attack is occurring right now. What are we going to put in place as a cybersecurity analyst based off of our organizational need and our policies to prevent further damage by the attack? So prioritization and escalation, these get into whatever your specific business goals are. Prioritization, if you have, like I spoke about just a few moments ago, the crown jewels of an organization, as a cybersecurity analyst, you learn the business goals of your organization. The prioritization comes from, okay, there's a workstation that's been attacked in the research and development department, but we are e-commerce building. We're an e-commerce organization. Is my server that is actually controlling and ensuring my transactions are happening protected? This workstation is a problem, but I've also seen some communication go to this server that is actually ensuring that the transactions are occurring and that customers are buying goods and their information protected. I need to prioritize which one I'm taking first. If I'm an e-commerce organization, that server needs to be protected. This workstation quarantine, we'll figure this out. If we're looking at one or two, number one is going to be that server. Number two is going to be that workstation. That's just you have to understand the business to prioritize your role or your task during an attack, after an attack, before an attack. Prioritization it's a cyclical process where you have to look at everything from a high level and hone it into your technical abilities, and you have to figure out what is important to my boss right now. Escalation that falls right under prioritization because your boss, your the goals of your organization from a strategic level, they need to know about what's going on based off how important it is. If someone has a failed user account login, you're not going to call your boss's cell phone at 2 a.m. If the primary server, the primary domain controller for the whole organization dies at 2 a.m., he needs to know about that, especially if that is a primary function for the organization. If this dies, the organization stops, he probably wants to be aware of this. A user account is like someone keeps logging in from remote connection, and this user account, they just keep trying different passwords. You probably don't want to tell them about that. You might want to tell them about it in the morning. Send them an email, maybe send them a text. Don't wake them up in the middle of the night, especially if you have controls in place to prevent anything drastic from happening from this. So when you're managing your attack surface, so if we go back to preventative, when I talked about our attack surface, our preventative actions are reducing our attack surface. So how did you manage your overall attack surface? You have a question about what your attack surface is. Your attack surface is, if I'm an adversary, what are my inject points? Now, my vectors are what I'm going to use as a vehicle to get in. If you look at if you sit on the street and look at the front of a house, the windows, the door, and the garage door are there. They're your attack surfaces. That's your attack surface because I mean, sure, if I had a bulldozer, I could just break through the wall on the side of the house, but the window might be a little bit easier. So the window might be a port that's open, but it's SSH. So it's like, I don't have the password, but I could just force this thing by just breaking the window. So your attack surface is the overarching picture that the adversary can see from the outside. So when we talk about managing our attack surface, as long as we do business using the open internet, or as long as we have people interacting, we're always going to have an attack surface. The only way you don't have an attack surface is if you take a server with um, your Bitcoin on it, and you encrypt it. You encrypt the drives on it, and then the password to break the encryption, you take that and you throw it into the ocean after you burn it, and then you take that and then you put that server into a safe, and then you don't know the combination. You spin it and you toss that in the ocean too. That's how you reduce your attack surface. No one can get into it. You can't either. In order for you to interact with these things, you're going to have an attack surface because that's how systems communicate. So, in order to best leverage the tools available to you in your job as a cybersecurity analyst, you have to manage that attack surface and how you can prevent the adversary from getting into your attack surface based off of things that you may not secure properly. So, when we talk about passive discovery of your attack surface, that's from a cybersecurity analyst. You're looking at things like when you're looking at packet captures, you can see things that are just trying to probe your attack surface. So you know what ports are open, or you should know what ports are open based off of you doing your own vulnerability scans and your assessments of your environment. You see things come across the network that are just normal. You just see it mundane day-to-day business. But then you start seeing, hey, we just implemented this new server that we want to try out. And then you're just like, oh, wow, what is this new IP address that's scanning every port on the server every day, just trying to find something that's open? That passive discovery, you're identifying something that's trying to interact with your attack surface, and you're using the tools that are available to you to basically, essentially, attempt to get into this new device, this new server that you have. So you're using that passive discovery to understand what is open to the adversary and what do I maybe best need to protect. Edge discovery is where essentially you look at it like you draw out a diagram of your network, and you're like, okay, when you're looking at your edge discovery, and this is something that's actually implemented by a lot of offensive operations guys, where they want to know where your internal network intersects with the world. That line that you draw in the middle is your edge. A lot of people think of that line as just your firewalls and your routers. That's not it. So, like if you see in the material, it talks about um, your edge can be anything that attacks to anything that touches the internet. But this also can be something such as email. The email technically entered your edge, but essentially that email is an internal user's interaction with the outside world. Even though that email has made it into the interior of a network, that doesn't mean that because it's past that boundary line that you've drawn from a logical standpoint, that is okay, it's inside your edge. No, it's still an edge boundary. It's still something that has entered your network from the outside world that has an opportunity to interact and give an adversary access to your internal network. So when you get into edge discovery, when you draw your network diagram, you look for what's called lines of demarcation. And these points are specific points where my network talks out to the world through this access point. What controls do I have at these specific access points around my network? And what can I do to prevent the adversary from taking advantage of those access points and taking down my network? So then we get into penetration testing. That is the role of penetration testers. They do this they look at these logs identified in passive discovery, and they use these diagrams identified through edge discovery to identify ways that they can possibly get into the network. Penetration testing comes into play when someone that you pay or you want to pay them, essentially, you want to set up contracts with them, and they basically are an adversary. They try to emulate the adversary. They look at the different points where your network can be vulnerable or it can be weak, and you want to pay the guy that's attacking your network. You don't want the guy that's attacking your network be the guy that wants to be paid by attacking your network. You want the guy that's attacking your network to be the one that's saying, these are your weak points. This is how I got in. This is what you should fix. And then you go back to your controls like, how do I control this risk? Because now I have a report saying, these are your points, your touch points to the outside world. This is how we took advantage of them. This is what you should put in place. Then now you have to weigh that with your business goals and your operational goals, what risk you're willing to accept, what risk you're willing to mitigate, what risk you're willing to avoid, what risk you're willing to transfer. All of this goes full circle. It's all cyclical. So, in order to the first step after you have a penetration test, or whereas the penetration test team emulates your adversary based off of your industry, you want to reduce your attack surface. These concepts, you will always reducing your attack surface is kind of one of the most attack like it's one of the most important things when it comes to an enterprise network. And I can tell you out of this list of reducing the attack surface, I mean it's just human nature. The worst one is employee training. The human asset is your most vulnerable asset in your organization. When I was in the Air Force and we did training on the best ways to mitigate attacks when we talk about employees, they used to always joke around and say the worst layer of the OSI model within our network is the layer 8 issue. Because layer 7 is the application. Who's looking at the application? The guy between the chair and the screen is your worst, your biggest vulnerability. Employee training is the hardest thing to do. I can tell you every day for 10 years, don't click on weird links. And the moment you get an email that says, do you want a day off? Click this link and do this training. Employees will click it. Click it 4 times. That's the hardest part. Everything else, if your policies are in place, you can actually control your asset inventory. It depends on the governance that you have in place in your organization. You can control his access to what? You do specific audits at certain points in time. If you do a monthly audit that goes through and says, hey, John got promoted to he's now a manager. Managers don't need access to the technical capability of the system. They manage the people that control the technical capability. So let's remove John's admin access and let's give him more of a HR access. Every month you should be doing these audit controls, these audit implementations to prevent a member from kind of stepping their way through an organization, and now he's just god of the organization because no one actually checked his rights as he moved up. So now you have that one guy in the organization that's like, yeah, I have access to that. Yeah, I have access to that. Yeah, I have access to that. And you're just like, well, what do you do for a living? Like, you have everything in this network, and you shouldn't. Patching and updating, that is the role of a cybersecurity analyst in some organizations. Patch Tuesdays, when it comes from Microsoft, a lot of organizations do Patch Tuesdays. Some organizations do what's called Patch Thursdays because the patch comes from Microsoft on Tuesday. Their change management team is reviewing the patch Tuesday night, Wednesday, and they've determined that that patch is not hurting their organization. So by Thursday morning, they're implementing it. That is how you reduce your attack surface. Network segmentation. The research and development section should not be able to talk freely to the financial department. Should not be like there should be some type of segmentation. That way, if one segment of the network, such as the guest portion of the fire of the Wi-Fi, if you're a guest on the network and we just give you access to the guest portion, you should not be able to just ping the manager's box. That's just not how that should work. So you segment these different things based off of the specific tasks, specific goals of what that network segment should be should have access to. Removing unnecessary components. This is big. When you take your computer out of a box, a lot of people plug it into the network. So happy I got this brand new computer. They're rubbing their hands together. They're just like, I'm going to download all the games. I'm going to do all the productivity, but they forget about that antivirus that they don't want, and they forget to delete it. But then they watch a news story a year later after they bought this, and this antivirus has turned into a CVE where people are like, remove this right now. Remove things that you don't need on your computer. And this is something that goes into baseline images of the system. Most organizations use baseline images where you can run scripts where if you know specifically what you need in that system, don't think to yourself like, oh, you know what? I'm going to keep this weird piece of software that I don't know what it means because maybe one day I'm going to use it. And then maybe that same day the adversary decides to use it because that piece of software is not very well patched or protected. So these are different things that you can use to reduce the attack surface. But one of them, the main one that I would definitely want to hit on, is the employee training, your layer 8 issue. That is going to be your biggest threat to your organization from enterprise level. So now we're going to get into explaining patch management. Patch management is essentially how I talked about. Microsoft has Patch Tuesdays. Most organizations have Patch Thursdays because you don't want to just throw a patch on a system as soon as it comes out. And for some background on that, if we go back to what SolarWinds was, the SolarWinds attack, essentially the reason why that attack was so successful was because the patch was the compromise. Essentially, a lot of the organizations that were attacked by it, um, the SolarWinds patch happened at the supply chain level of the attack, and organizations patched their SolarWinds servers, which essentially gave uh, the adversary access to their internal servers. It wasn't tested, and then later down the line, people identified that the SolarWinds server was reaching out in ways that it had never reached out before, and that's how the compromise was identified. So the best way to prevent this is your change management, your patch management protocols within your organization. You don't just because Apple comes out with the newest iPhone patch That doesn't mean it's the most secure. Wait a minute. I always tell people it's like you have to strike that balance between keeping your systems updated and secure and standing by for people to update their stuff first and let the adversary find the weaknesses in the update. And then you find that middle ground and like, okay, now that they fixed the real patch, instead of going to iOS 17.1, I'm gonna go to iOS 17.3 because 17.2, there's a bunch of TikTok stories about how to break into this thing. So that's basically how patch management is explained. Understanding the balance between patches, understanding how to apply patches, and having a change management program involved into how you implement those patches within your organization. So to assist with this, there are tools that can assist with deploying patches. So what you can do as a cybersecurity analyst, you can implement a change management process that can sandbox. I'll say sandbox. That's essentially what it's doing. You sandbox the patch. You run the patch within your real world environment that's configured for how you actually do business. You run the patch. You try to break it. You try to do all these things to it to ensure that the patch is actually still keeping your network secure and still your systems are still working as intended. And then you can implement configuration management tools to help you deploy your patch to ensure that your patch actually is deployed properly to all the systems that it needs to go to and everything is still working. So it's basically taking your change management process and actually putting it in a real world environment of your network. I always recommend, most organizations already do this, but if you get to your organization and they don't do this, start with small batches. Don't say, okay, I test 3 computers in a sandbox and everything works. So now I'm going to deploy it to 15,000 computers on my network. And then they wonder why it's like, oh, the whole network went down. It's like, yeah, because you tried it on 3 and you went to 15,000. Start in small batches, start in small subnets, and then work your way from there. Then when we talk about the full circle aspect of this, prioritization comes into play in this. Your most important assets within your network will most likely be last. If just saying, you normally want to, in one side, you want to say like, oh no, I want to patch my most important assets first. That's not really what you want to do because the patch is unstable. If you don't know what it's actually going to do, you patch those first. You might have just opened up a hole into your most sensitive jewels within your network. Patch kind of your least important ones first and let it, if it's going to crash, let it crash the network of the guys that run the guest network first before you actually put it on your enterprise servers that run things. This is just another video that talks about specifically how patch management can undermine an organization's security and also help. It's kind of like one of those CompTIA videos that kind of give more of a context, but as I said with these cohorts, I want to give a context of what I've seen in the real world and apply it with analogies and not kind of just regurgitate cert master's material. Maintenance windows. Maintenance windows goes off of your business goals within your organization. If you get the most business, you make the most sales between 8 and 4, you probably don't want to update your domain controller at noon. I want to update it at 1 a.m. That's essentially all, and that's a part of your change management policy. That's essentially all maintenance windows is basically explaining. So just to summarize some of the things that we've talked about, what I want to do is just jump into a quick practice practice test based off of lesson 1. And with this, I want this to be interactive, in which I want you to throw into the chat what you think the answer is. And then we can move through this so we can open up the floor to questions. So we'll start with lesson 1. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the question, and then I'm going to analyze the question based off of the test taking tips that I like to give students. And then we're going to just reveal the answer, go through the answer real quick, and then go on to the next question. Support managers providing guidelines on handling customer inquiries to the help desk. Which control class is support manager implementing? Operational, technical, detective, and managerial. So within this question, the way our approach this question is when we talked about the control types, we remember technical is hands-on keyboard. We're talking about like scripts. There's nothing specifically technical about providing guidelines on handling customer inquiries. Managerial at super high level, that's way up there. Detective technically does not apply to this question. Being at the technical, it does not talk about logs. Then operational is kind of that middle level management. So with that information I gave you as the background, I'd like you all to just, if you could, just toss what you think the answer is into the chat. Okay, so now we'll answer the question. Based off the consensus, you all said A. So the way I like to approach the question is we need to break the question down. Support managers providing guidelines on handling customer inquiries to the help desk, which control class is support manager implementing. Read the full question, then go to your answers. Operational, technical, detective, managerial. Operational, we're talking about middle level managers. Technical, there's nothing technical about this question. Detective, that is a whole different concept. Managerial, this is not something that the CEO is dealing with. That's the best way to approach answering this question when you're analyzing it from a perspective of the way to approach the way CompTIA asks questions. A CEO of a small corporation has decided to continue using a legacy system despite security concerns. This is an example of which management principle? Risk acceptance, risk avoidance, risk mitigation, and risk transference. So for this one, I want you all to just throw what you think it is, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so looks like the majority of you have put in your answer. Um, so outside of you all's answer, let's go ahead and just determine which one. So I'll answer which one that you all put. And the way we'll approach this one is we'll determine why the other ones are incorrect. Risk transference, we're not talking about a third party or insurance company. Risk mitigation, he's using a legacy system. He hasn't talked about patching or anything to prevent and attack the legacy system. Risk avoidance, not avoiding the risk because the system is still in use based off of the words continue using. At that point, we have identified that he has decided to accept the risk because he decided to continue using. He's like, all right, they're like, hey, this is legacy and this is old and it's going to break. He's like, keep using it. Sure, you're accepting the risk. As a middle manager, you have given him the information. As a cybersecurity analyst, you've given him the information to say, this is legacy. What do we do? The CEO, the higher level leadership says, keep going. You have essentially transferred that risk from you to him. You're like, okay, I've given you all the facts and you said accept the risk. So we will continue doing what you want to do, sir. All right, so an engineer is considering an appropriate risk responses using threat modeling. They're trying to understand which threat actors are in scope for their organization. How does threat modeling identify the principal risk and tactics, techniques, and procedures for which their systems may be susceptible? So this one gets, so when we talked about threat modeling, this is when we talked about how do we convey the threat to our enterprise, to our systems, to the CEO, or to the high level manager. So when we look at those things, what do we care about? And I want you all to put what you think the answers are in this. Then we will select those answers and we'll talk about it. And remember, this one is a select the best three. All right, so I see ACD. So y'all said by evaluating this from an attacker's point of view, using tools such as diagrams, and analyzing the system from a defender's point of view. So the main reason why you all were correct, and let's highlight the main words in this, is you're using threat modeling. The number one thing when you're using threat modeling is big wigs and guys that are not IT, guys and gals that are not IT, diagrams, pictures. Like our boss wants to see pictures. He likes photos and he wants you to show colors and things of that nature. That's how you're going to convey the risk to him. A neutral perspective does not give the boss what he wants. It just doesn't. Like a neutral perspective, it's like he's neutral to it. He's like he doesn't know. What is the attacker see and how are you going to defend against it? So when you're talking about threat modeling, obviously it's a diagram because high level managers do not want to see script and code. Level managers want to see pictures and colors. And when you're talking about how something is a threat and how it can and how why it's important, what's the red, what's the blue? And that's basically kind of the way you can break down that question and immediately hone in on what the answer will be. Next, we have a systems administrator runs a scan on an application server and finds several vulnerabilities. The issues are not severe and patches are available in each instance. The administrator decided to install the available patches. What risk management principle did they demonstrate? So, in the interest of time, just toss your answers in there. We'll kind of go through there. We got so Gabby. After this, we'll have a conversation about your any questions you may have had on the last one. I apologize, I didn't see that one till just now. But this one, you all said it's a risk mitigation. That's correct. So the reason why it is a risk mitigation is because the administrator decided to install the available patches. So if you want to break this question down, so when we talk about risk management principle, do they demonstrate? That is the question that's being asked. So you have your four options, which mitigation, acceptance, avoidance, and transference. So if you want to look at it from a point of view, if you just want to answer this question quick and just find the most important aspects of this question, install the available patches. If we remember back to the material we went over, installing patches is an acceptance because you're doing something about it. It's not avoidance, once again, because you're doing something about it instead of just deleting it or removing it. Avoidance will kind of be just removing the application server. Transference is you're not buying an insurance company. You're not moving it over to a third party. The only answer here is mitigation based off of the specific phrase, install the available patches. So now an IT director reviews a cybersecurity audit and learns that an old accounting server is significantly out of compliance. Rather than attempting repairs, the director concludes that decommissioning the server is the safest course of action. What is the risk management principle the IT director is following? Right, and just toss your answers in there. You all said risk avoidance. This is just like the last one. He's avoiding the risk by just throwing it away, decommission it. This, from a business perspective, he is determined that it is better to just get rid of it than try to fix it. This is not a situation where it's cheaper to keep her. So this is a situation where it's out of the other things, the IT director has reviewed the cybersecurity audit, which is given by the cybersecurity professionals, the role that you all will be playing within an organization. You all have given him the proper information, and you have determined that it's significantly out of compliance. When you see words like significantly out of compliance, that means is like that's a report that's basically saying like it's old. We could fix it. It's not going to be fun though. You have to have that verbiage in a more professional manner in your report. So he's looked at what the cybersecurity analysts have given him. He's made a decision based off of like, okay, Essentially, you all give him the right information for him to say, like, just throw it away, start over. Let's do something else. He just avoids the risk by throwing it away. So large corporation's security operations center team is processing a recent incident. The team refers to a playbook for guidance about the incident. What type of functional security control does the playbook represent? They're processing a recent incident. They refer to a playbook for guidance about the incident. Once again, just put your answers in there. Okay, so y'all put responsive. And I think you all kind of understand why you gravitated to it, and this is kind of how I want you to approach the answers when you're taking CompTIA tests of this nature. Right here, incident response, responsive, playbook for guidance. When you get into your incident response procedures, you're probably going to have a binder sitting in your work center that you're just like, okay, this happened. And it's going to be something that's probably going to be controlled by the organization. It's been tested, tabletopped, and exercised. A playbook. What do I do next? So that can help you gravitate. So out of this whole question, this right here gravitated you toward the answer. It's a playbook for guidance. It's incident response procedures, which turn into responsive controls. Security engineer installs a next generation firewall on the perimeter of a network. The installation is an example of what type of security control class. This is a very small question, but those golden words are still there. I want you to answer what you all think it is, basically like just with the small information that you have, very small background, golden words are still there. And use that idea to approach how to answer the question. And you all have answered. Isn't it cool? Next generation firewall on the perimeter of a network. A CEO does not know what you're talking about. Technical, that's something that you all are talking about on your ops floor. You're not in the boardrooms talking about a next generation firewall unless you're buying this thing and you're a company trying to explain this to a CEO, and they're not going to start talking about the perimeter of a network firewall unless that's what they tell the cybersecurity analyst. To CEOs, they're saying stuff like uh, fortress against the adversary. They're not using those technical level words that kind of get down to the weeds. And this at that point that's what turns this into a technical level example. So mission critical system is offline at an organization due to a zero-day attack. The associated software vendor plans to release a patch to remediate the vulnerability. What the following are important patch management considerations for this scenario? So this is another select the best three options. Just as you all are kind of thinking of the answer in your heads, um, look at it from this perspective. It's the mission critical system is offline. It's due to a zero-day attack. So that should trigger certain controls that you're going to start putting in place and how you're going to do that. Remember, this is after the fact, and like you've already identified that there is a zero-day attack on network or mission critical system. So we have an ABC, so patch test environment, immediate push delivery of critical security patches, and specific team responsible for reviewing vendor supplied newsletters and security patch bulletins. So, so Gabby, you've already said B and D and you think A. So we're going to go with the consensus with A, B, and C. And the reason why it's not D and what kind of assists you in answering this question is it already, so when we look at routine schedule and then non-critical patches, And then we look at the question and we compare that to offline due to a 0-day attack. You see, so it's something that'll kind of assist us with understanding the best way to approach the answer by looking at the question again and looking at the answers. So this is something that has happened after the attack. Delta is a preventative measure, which is ensuring that we put the a schedule of critical patches that goes back to our Microsoft Patch Tuesdays, organizational patch Thursdays. So the organization recently had an attack that resulted in system data loss. The system administrator must now restore the system with the data backup. What functional security control was the system administrator able to implement? So I can give you the golden words in this question. Recently had an attack that resulted in this system data loss. Okay, so you all are kind of getting it. So I see Charlie is what you all agree on. That is correct. So the one thing that helps you here is recently had an attack. The attack is not recently had an attack means it's not actually we're not allowed for responding to this thing. So it's not IR, it is not responsive. It's not preventative because it wasn't before. It's not compensating because we're not talking about measures to put in place to look at both sides. It's corrective because it had an attack. How do we come back from it? We know it happened. It's a thing. Our IR process is over. What's next? That's corrective. So a support team is preparing for an upcoming maintenance window. What tasks should the support team accomplish during the proactive maintenance windows? So preparing for an upcoming maintenance window. Which three tasks should they perform while they are implementing this maintenance window? And this is, we're getting into the specific act of. So we have BCD, ABC, and BCD. So because of we have 2 over the 1, we will go with the BCD. This is a really important aspect of kind of what your one way to approach how to be a cybersecurity analyst out in the field. You're talking about doing certain things on your network that cause a lot of activity on your network. Delta D is actually one of the most important ones because essentially if an attacker is very trained and they have been on your network for a while and they've been kind of conducting a lot of reconnaissance, they will try to do things when you're doing things because of the assumption that you're not looking for them. While if you say we're going to be doing a whole system deployment, and while we're doing the system deployment, we're going to be doing this other thing. We got all this stuff going on. We're all going to do it at between the hours of 2 and 4. The attacker is going to assume that okay, they're probably not checking logs because they know everything's going to be active. The update server is going to be going crazy. Their their domain controller is going to be going crazy. Everything's going to just be going super fast and doing all this stuff. So this is the time to act. But then if you take that information, knowing that the adversary may think like that, and you say, filter out me while I'm doing my actions. And you see some workstation while you're doing all these update actions, you see a workstation just going crazy, just scanning, just doing all this other stuff. And you understand your network and what you're doing, and you say, that's not me. I've already, that is not, what I'm doing has nothing to do with what that thing's doing right there. There might be a way to find the adversary because they will try to find ways to kind of be sneaky. And as a cybersecurity analyst, you have to think, you can never think from a neutral perspective. Either you have to think blue when it comes to patching, but you also have to think red when it comes to patching. You have to think blue when it comes to monitoring, which is the best ways to do it. But you also have to think of it from a standpoint of how would I attack me? A system administrator is hardening a newly provisioned server with software patches and security updates. What functional security control is the system administrator performing? think this one was almost a giveaway. This one was, yeah. All right, I see the difficulty level was easy on this one. All right, you got that was a giveaway. Software patches, you're preventing something. It's before an action has happened, and you are hardening your network. You're reducing your attack surface by implementing those patches. So that will be a preventative control. So a cybersecurity consultant is examining security control classes for an infrastructure as a service provider. The classes measure how effectively assets are protected. With security control class would the consultant examine to gain oversight of the information system? We have technical, managerial, operational, detective. Technical, member, it's hands-on keyboard. Managerial, it's CEOs. Operational is middle level. Detective, it does not relate to this. And you all place B. Yes, so this is the type of the conversations that are happening upstairs in the C-level suites. Effectively, assets are protected. Which security control class would the consultant examine to gain oversight of the information system? When you tell this to a technical level cybersecurity analyst, the first question they're going to say is like, "What are you talking about? How are you going to do this?" But those questions are very, very technical. When techies, us techie people are when we hear things like this, we always just sit in the back room like, "Oh, here they go with the buzzwords." But that's what managers like to hear is the buzzwords. So when you start to see buzzwords, those big high level management, like you're reading a magazine about the new tech radar coming out, it's you're just like, okay, what is this actually doing? When you start seeing that, it's most likely a managerial control. You start seeing business level stuff, operational. When it starts going in the weeds, technical. The system administrator is performing patchwork on their organization's systems. The administrator realizes the maintenance window will close before they complete the patchwork. What action must the administrator take to abide by the change management policy? So in this situation, so their maintenance window is about to close. When their maintenance window is about to close, they realize that once this closes, I'm going to start affecting my business goals. My boss approved me to do things on the network between 6 and 10, and it's 9:57, and I still have things running. What do I do as a cybersecurity analyst? So I put alpha. That's correct. Reason being, as when you start talking about maintenance windows, that is what is approved by the person that's willing to accept risk based off of the information that you've given as a cybersecurity analyst. This is what the patch is doing, this is how long it'll take, and this is how it'll affect business. He understands his business, and everyone kind of understands, and normally this is a group effort that's making this decision. You can do this between 6 and 10, and anything past 10, I'll accept the risk on that. That doesn't mean it's like, okay, it's 9:56, but there are only 7 systems left. Should I just push it to the 7? No, because you're not authorized to push you're not authorized to push it past 10. So if you're still going and it's 9:57, if you enjoy having your job, it's not like a movie where we're just like, no, I want to protect the network and I'm gonna do everything that I can do to protect the network. Well, what do you have authorization to do is the question. If the authorization stopped at 10, then at 10, you need to do at 9:45, really, you should be looking at like, okay, we should probably try to figure out how to stop this because after 10 o'clock, I don't have any more coverage and I'm making decisions that I do not have the authority to make. So that's kind of how that assists you with answering that question. Kind of have to look at it from what your standpoint is in the organization and best answer the question off of that mindset. Legal affairs team of an international conglomerate elects to assign certain risks to a third party. Which risk management principle are they implementing? And that giveaway here is third party. You all put Delta. That is correct. It's transference. When you see third party, that's USA, that's Geico, that's Allstate. Let someone else deal with it. I don't want to. I live in Texas. If I don't, I can't afford to just pay out of my pocket to just live out here on these roads. So I'm going to let USA deal with it because it's crazy out here, and I'm going to transfer that risk to someone else. So security analyst reviews a firewall logs source IP addresses to investigate an attack. These logs are a representation of what type of functional security control? So when we're talking about reviewing firewall logs source IP address. That's correct, detective. When you're reviewing, so this, you're sitting in the SOC, you're looking at a seam, you're looking at the logs go across your network, you're trying to figure out what's going on. You're trying to detect an attack, not correct anything, nothing has happened. You're not putting patches in, you're not preventing anything from happening, and you're not actually putting controls in and weighing balance, and you're not balancing the red and the blue side and what can happen in the risk. You're just sitting in the SOC on your 9 o'clock shift and you're just watching logs go across your screen. That's a detective action. All right, so that is complete. What I'll do now